So let's check in with Labour. What's happening with them? Well, what's going on is they're at it again. So on Monday, they announced major cutbacks at NHS England. They were saying that 6,500 jobs are at risk. Well, today, they've come out and said that they're just going to scrap NHS England. So this is really interesting that they've decided to get rid of it completely. The Public Services Union has said that the method of the announcement is shambolic. Obviously, you've got things like patients' charities are now saying, well, the real litmus test is the patient's access to the service and if that's going to be interrupted, etc. It seems like, again, they really are just doing exactly that. They're tinkering around the edges. But from what I can see, this is going to save approximately £500 million. And again, which is not really that much. It's kind of a drop in the ocean compared to everything else. It's kind of, it's like 0.5% of the overall budget. Now, it's interesting. NHS England was actually set up, I believe, by the Tories in 2012. And although the Tories scrapped like 300 Quangos, there's a lot less than there were. Most of them were brought in by the Blair and Brown governments. Things have kind of been entrenched for a very long time. And it's great that the Labour government is actually looking at this and seeing that, yes, this is a Quango that really we don't need. There's a bit of overlap with other departments. And so they're bringing it back in line with central government. So that's great. This is just another kind of place where they've identified they could get some easy cash savings to dig themselves out of this giant financial hole. They're coming across as a little bit all over the place, really. They've done that since they've taken power. And it seems like there's a bit of a battle raging in the Labour Party between the more moderate against the kind of much more far left kind of idiots that you get. And like any political entity, there's always a broad spectrum of opinions. I mean, I've got to say, it's a bit of a small win for the right. They should take it. And it's going to be broadly welcomed, really, regardless. It's a pity that they won't go on to shut things like the Sentencing Council, which there's been a big deal about that in the news this week, the policing college, etc., etc. There's a whole bunch of stuff, really, that they could actually rein in and bring back into central government so that it doesn't interfere with the everyday runnings of a normal functioning democracy. Also, it's really interesting. The BBC put out an article saying that Starmer's kind of talk about the civil service and the government kind of overlaps and echoes Liz Truss. It's interesting there because the BBC just painted that article and the current government in a slightly more sympathetic light than they did with Truss, where they basically rubbished her, called her a bit daft for even daring to broach the subject of the blob and the deep state, as they like to call it in the States, which she kind of uses that language. And then they go on to highlight something that Tony Blair said back in the day about Quangos, about the fact of them being sort of this unaccountable sort of entity, which is interesting because he brought in a lot of these Quangos and he outsourced government to these bureaucratic kind of things that we just haven't got any control over, and the government really, really needs to look into that. It's been pretty catastrophic to just liberty and justice, governmental power, and the ability to sort of make strides to turn things around. So it is a small win, and we should definitely take it. But it's just really interesting that, on the other hand, that this employment rights bill that they're trying to push through, apparently there's clause 18 of this new rights bill. It demands reasonable steps to prevent harassment of protected characteristics. So in reality, what that means is if there's staff in your local pub, go down the boozer, and they hear you having some kind of banter that they don't like, a joke that's a little bit kind of off colour or whatever, involving anybody with a protected characteristic, they then can report that. So you've got to be careful of the banter police when you go down to the pub. So it's really not a great state of affairs, and it's just very confusing what this government wants to do. It seems to me as if they want to appeal to reform voters. They can see reform a neck and neck, if not a little bit ahead of them in the polls. They're looking at some of the things where they're saying, oh, okay, maybe we could tailor this a little bit and we'll get some, we'll snag some reform voters. Because reform being the name of the game, that's exactly the kind of thing that people would like to see. So I think they're trying to go for the on the fence people who have got a foot in either camp, who maybe have been Labour but feel like they've been betrayed and they're thinking of going to Reform. I think that a lot of this is a ploy to get those types of people. So yeah, we'll see. I mean, it's we'll just have to take this as a little bit of a small win. And again, it'll be interesting to see where Labour are going with this.